So now we're talking more about censorship, and Chomsky weighed in on this. Now Chomsky has been really hard. He's going hard wrong about a lot of stuff in his old age, but he's sticking to his guns about censorship, which is good, and freedom of speech. And he famously, well, to me famously said, you know, if you don't defend a person's right to speak, someone who repulses you, I'm paraphrasing. He says, then you don't support free speech. And it's, if you have to find the person who offends you the most, and you have to protect his right to speech. And if you don't, you're not for free speech. And so he's still sticking by it. So he went on with Russell Brand, and let's listen to what he said about it.
The United States today.
But by the way, I am jealous that Russell Brand gets everybody to go on his show. They won't come on my show. Chomsky won't even return our emails anymore. At least he returned a few of my emails a couple years ago, but now he won't even return my emails. He won't come on.
Is living under a kind of totalitarian culture which has never existed in my lifetime and is much worse in many ways than the Soviet Union before Gorbachev. Go back to the 1970s. People in Soviet Russia could access BBC, Voice of America, German television, if they wanted to find out the news. If today in the United States you want to find out what Prime Minister Lavrov of Russia is saying, can't do it. It's barred. Americans are not permitted to hear what Russians are saying. Can't get Russian television, can't access Russian sources. That means also that fine American journalists like Chris Hedges, one of the best, is cut out, barred from Americans because he happens to have a program running on RT, Russian television. You want to find out what the adversary is saying, which is of utmost importance. You can maybe tune into Indian state television and find it out, or you can read it on Al Jazeera. But the United States has imposed constraints on freedom of access to information, which are astonishing, and which in fact go beyond what was the case in post-Stalin Soviet Russia. That's just a remarkable fact. It goes well beyond anyone who dares to break the party line on the dominant issue of today, Ukraine, is simply demonized, vilified, can't be sent to the Gulag. It's a free country still, but you can barely talk. And that has very dangerous implications for the current situation and beyond.
Now, that's all very well said, and I agree with everything he said. The part that rubs me a little bit the wrong way is that I feel like he's been on the side of these people in the era of Trump. And Chomsky has made himself almost irrelevant. And when he could have been saying things pushing back against authoritarianism, instead he pushed for authoritarianism when it came to the mandates, the vaccines, the trucker protests, the greatest protests so far in my lifetime, shut down an entire capital. And so it would have been helpful if he would have helped give his support to that. He didn't, but he will speak out on foreign policy, I guess, and Ukraine. So that's still very useful. So I would say thankful to Professor Chomsky for that. And what he just said there is making a big stir, and people are trying to discredit him. I saw people now, Aaron, I saw someone say, isn't it amazing? He says you can't hear what people say, but I just heard him say that and I'm in America. What do you say back to ridiculous retorts like that?
Well, Chomsky's point is that you can't hear RT and all of its programming because it was taken off the airwaves and taken off of YouTube. Years and years of reporting too, not just its current broadcast, but also its archive. So for example, the Chris Hedges show that he mentioned, that entire archive was removed. And that is blatant censorship, and nobody made a peep about it in the mainstream. It was accepted. Much like nobody cared when RT was forced to register as a foreign agent during the height of Russiagate. And some of us warned that all this was going to lead to more censorship and more demonization of opinions that are deemed to be going against the establishment. That's exactly what has happened. And that's what Russiagate helped legitimize, is censorship. You just call something Russian disinformation, or even call it just Russian. Just calling it Russian is enough to get it taken off of the air. And
we have to keep our fighting spirit up, Aaron, for this war of a country that I'm not in. I don't want to be discouraged hearing propaganda from somebody. A show I was on, they were saying, you and Jimmy, actually, they were saying you were spewing Russian propaganda. And I'm like, well, do I just want one kind of propaganda? I'd like multiple propagandas to sort through.
And, you know, what people will also say, Jimmy, is they'll say, well, look, in Russia, they've banned American networks and American-funded networks. Okay, do you want to act like Russia? Do you want to be authoritarian as well? I thought we're supposed to care about democracy. That's what this whole thing is about. So the argument that they're doing it, so we should do it too, I thought the whole point was to defend democracy. That's why we're supposedly fighting in Ukraine. So if you care about democracy, you care about free speech, you'll support it for everybody, especially people whose views you might not like. Yeah. And Jimmy, not to get into a debate with you about Chomsky, but I'll say that, in my opinion, people above the age of 90 should get a pass when it comes to being scared of COVID. That's my view of Chomsky. Is, you know, that was a scary time, and he said what he said I thought was totally ridiculous, in calling for the unvaccinated to be isolated. But I also think that someone who's done so much noble work over the course of his life, who's over 90 years old now, should get a bit of a pass.
Yeah, you know, my grandfather was really afraid of the Nazis, which is why I think he turned in your grandparents. And so he was really scared. He was really scared. And now you have to live with the trauma of your dad not being held enough as a baby because of the goddamn Nazis. And you know, so if you want to excuse it, go ahead. But I know your history.
Well, I'll forgive your grandparents if you can forgive Chomsky.
I can forgive them.
Okay.
I think I've forgiven them because I think we've come out as the clear victors in this mandate vaccine. Unbelievable clear victors. And I always said you can't mandate the vaccines because they don't stop the transmission or the contraction of it. And that was the case I kept making over and over. And for that, making that case, people called me anti-vax. I'm not anti-vax. I'm double vax myself. I tell people if you're at risk of COVID, serious illness, you should get vaccinated. That's not what it's about. It was about authoritarianism and forcing people to take a product for profit. And now YouTube makes me say that the vaccines, while they don't stop transmission or contraction, they slow the spread. I'm supposed to say that.
Jimmy, I thought you were forgiving him because he looks kind of like Billy Crystal in The Princess Bride. Remember that Prince Humperdinck's miracle worker?
So here's what Glenn Greenwald said about it. He says Chomsky, like everyone, has had some bad moments, including his call for the unvaccinated to be housed in camps. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
That was a joke. He didn't say put him in.
What is he, Stephen King over here?
I think Glenn's saying that in jest. I don't think Chomsky actually said put him in.
I've seen Chomsky sell out free speech on campus on an episode of Penn and Teller's Bullshit years ago. They're talking about free speech, and things he says is right. I think is right, but it was real talking out both sides of your mouth because he says, well, it's their community; they can decide what's appropriate for speech there.
No,
that was a 90-year-old Chomsky. That was a much younger Chomsky. Yeah, Penn and Teller's Bullshit. They were asking him about it, and he was saying that.
Okay, I wish I would like to see that. But here he goes on to say, but he has never wavered, and he's rebutting you, Kurt. Glenn
I
Greenwald,
hope that I'm wrong.
He says that he has never wavered an inch in his underlying defense of free speech, an unyielding defense of free speech and contempt for censorship. That value was once central to leftists. And good point. He also goes on to say this: some purposely distracted from Chomsky's primary point Saturday by mocking his claim that even Russians in the USSR could access Western media. That aside, there's no question that COVID, then Ukraine, ushered in unprecedented censorship in the West. No doubt. And I'm proud to say that we led the fight against that censorship here on this show. We brought on Dr. Robert Malone, who is a leading virologist and developers of vaccines. He had a different narrative about the COVID vaccine than the establishment wanted, and so they had to write articles in the Atlantic and have everybody and their brother smear him as some kind of a kook instead of what he actually is, an expert in the field and one of the most published and most renowned guys. With I think he has 8 patents on related to vaccines. So there you have it. So Chomsky's good to see him with a good take once in a while after the age of 90. Good for you, Noam. We're cheering for you. Maybe he's on some new kind of medicine and it's clearing the fog out of his head. Who knows? Fingers crossed. Aaron doesn't like when I say that. Why, Aaron? Why can't I say that?
I believe in respecting our elders, especially someone who's done the work he's done over the course of his life. And again, in the time of a very scary disease, we all had our experience with being freaked out by it early on. You did too. That was
no
his
doubt.
version of it. That was his version. So his version of wiping down the groceries was calling for the unvaccinated to be separated, and not putting not putting camps. He said they should be separated. He thought they were a threat.
A cleansing, if you will.
He was totally wrong. But he's,
he called for a crystal dock on the unvaccinated. Be honest.
He called for them to be isolated, and that was wrong. It was totally wrong. But to say, people who say he's lost it, he's totally with it. I just think he had his moment of COVID fear, that many people did, and that's how he expressed it.
Well, I'll forgive him when he apologizes for it.
Okay.
And I
already forgave him. Unlike Jimmy, I forgave him before he even did it.
I say he doesn't ever say it. I say he never going to apologize, and we'll know soon if he's going to. Do you know what I mean?
Think he will.
I don't think so either. Come see our stand-up comedy. We'll be in Los Angeles, Bakersfield, Indianapolis, Louisville, Cincinnati, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Detroit, lots more. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all our tickets.